long session of Gita on the go. Let's read shlok number 4 and 5, that is 3.4 and 3.5 together. The continuing theme in this chapter as it started, just to remind you, was that Arjun had asked a question. Although Krishna had given all the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita in the second chapter, just like a pouring of a fountain, but for a student it becomes a little difficult to assimilate all the information, all the knowledge in one go. So like a good student, Arjun has his bewilderments, has his questions, but more than that, he is asking the questions for us. And he started by asking that on one hand, Krishna, you are asking me to drop all abominable action, because he had mistaken war as abominable action, whereas Krishna meant leaving war or leaving his duties as abominable action. So the confusion between karma and jnana, which path to follow, is there in Arjun. He's asking it for us to clarify things for us. Who is it who can take up jnana? Who is it that can take up karma? So let's clarify this for ourselves. Let's understand this and try to understand our own inclinations and decide which path of spirituality works best for us. Well, in this particular chapter, Krishna is advising Arjun and all of us to better take up the path of karma yoga, but he also hints at buddhi yoga, because karma without any jnana is actually not going to work. Now, in fact, let me ask you all a question. Why do you think in the recent times, for example, in our generations and the generations that are following, are people just leaving the path of religion whatsoever? In the earlier times, spirituality, religion was a part of everyday lives of people. But more and more people have just renounced this path now. They think that doing well in life, earning, enjoying movies and enjoying malls is all there is to it. Now this question, if you really ask yourself, is somewhere that when we started getting educated, we started asking for evidences for everything. We wanted proofs for everything. But because of lack of philosophical knowledge explained logically to us, we did not follow the rituals. Because as we become educated, we need proofs, we need validations for everything that we do. So those rituals which were being carried out by our ancestors unquestioningly did not fall good with us, and we just left them because we couldn't find any logics or reasoning behind it. And that's why I'm so thankful to ISKCON as an association, because they are taking up this matter of spirituality very scientifically, rather than just enforcing and just forcing the rituals on us. They're explaining everything very scientifically for the educated classes, so that for people like me, it becomes easy to take up the processes, because then now I know the logic and the reasoning behind it. And that is actually the theme of today's shloka as well, because in the previous shloka 3.3, Krishna had started answering Arjun by saying that, Arjun, look, there are two kinds of people in this world, majorly two kinds of people in this world. One who take up the jnana path, which means the people who try to understand themselves by analytical knowledge or empirical knowledge. That means reading the shastras and using their minds to understand what it is, what is soul, what is matter, what is this material nature, what is God. And the other class of men are the karma, the people who follow the karma path, the karma yogis, who believe in doing things, who believe in action. So often these two classes of men have been at loggerheads. It's a time immemorial thing. You know, the Jnani say to Karmi that you're just doing things without knowing anything, mindlessly doing things, you know, doing action. And the Karmis say to Jnanis that you're just sitting idle, sitting still, doing nothing, you know. So these accusations have been carried on. But in the previous shloka, Krishna made it clear that there are two types of people, but Srila Prabhupada in that purport has given us a very good insight that karma and jnana are actually interdependent on each other. In fact, one cannot go without the other. One is not complete without the other, and that's why the combination of both of them is termed as Buddhi Yoga. Now, in this particular shlok in 3.4 and 3.5 further as it goes, Krishna is going to further elaborate this and explain this to Arjun. Let's read the shlokas and then understand how karma and jnana have their interdependence, where jnana is like theory, karma is like practical, where without reading the theory, practical makes no sense, but without practical, theory is also incomplete. So we need in our lives a complementation of both to really understand things. Let's say the prayer first. Om Ajnana Tibirandhasya Jnananjan Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. This one magic mantra, this one Maha Mantra is greater than all the empirical knowledge put together, because it contains within itself the essence of spirituality. Try it, to experience it, to believe it. That's my request to you. Alright, so the shloka number 3.4 reads, Na karmanam anarambhan naishkarmyam purusha shnute na cha sanyasanadeva siddhim samadhi gacchati. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So here Krishna is explaining the ethos of sannyas or renunciation as it is called in English. Now the term sannyas, how do we perceive it as a common person? How do you and I understand this? Whenever we think of sannyas, we think of a person who has just left everything behind, their families, their professions, their duties. So by leaving everything behind, they just go in search of knowledge by reading scriptures, by maybe traveling to pilgrimage places, right? So that's the image that conjures up in our mind. Now let's understand how Krishna is going to explain what really is renunciation, what really is the Jnana path or sannyas, taking sannyas, what is the actual import of it. So Krishna is saying here that just by abstaining from work, which means just by deciding, okay, I am going to renounce everything and from now onwards nothing doing for me, no work for me, I am going in pursuit of spiritual knowledge. Just by doing that, one cannot achieve freedom from reaction. As Krishna is going to further explain this in later verses also, that even if one takes sannyas and decides to do nothing, and why this desire not to do nothing? Because of the reason that These people understand that when we do something, there is a reaction that we have to go through, which means if there is karma, there is going to be phal. So they think, alright, no karma, no phal. But Krishna is warning them, this is not going to happen. Just by giving up work, it doesn't mean that you're going to be free from action. The explanations are going to come later, right? And nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection, which means just by renouncing everything, if you think you're going to get siddhi, you're going to get perfection in life, that is also not the case. Obviously, the explanations are going to come later also, but here Srila Prabhupada is giving us a very profound purport wherein he tells us that the renounced order of life can be accepted when one has been purified by the discharge of the prescribed form of duties which are laid down just to purify the hearts of materialistic men. See, we need to understand that if we want to give up something, we truly need to have no desire for it in our heart as well. Otherwise, it is going to be just artificial renunciation, and as soon as our guard goes just a little bit down, all the desires are going to boomerang back to us. Which means, unless our heart is actually purified and free of materialistic desires of sense gratification, there is no point artificially trying to give it all up. And Srila Prabhupada is telling us, Krishna has made a certain process. He says that first do your prescribed duties, as we have read in the previous verses also, that Krishna has made the varnashram system. If you are in the Brahminical order, which means if you're a Brahmin, do the duties of a Brahmin. If you are a Kshatriya, do the duties of a Kshatriya, which is what he's telling Arjuna also. You're a Kshatriya, fight for dharma. If you're a Vaishya, then generate income for the entire society. If you're a Shudra, then serve your masters with honesty and hard work. So if one does one's duties according to one's varna and one's ashram. Ashram means if you are a brahmachari, then abstain from all sense gratification and indulge in studying the scriptures and all. And then when you are in grihastha life, then there is a different set of duties and so on, which means in whichever varna and ashram we are at the moment. For us, more practically, if we are a householder or a student, the duties prescribed to us may be studying, maybe looking after our homes, guests, looking after the education of our children, looking after the spiritual emancipation of our children. That's also very important, because parents often think that giving the children food and education is all that's required, but it is the duty of the parents also to guide their children on the spiritual path. So performing all the duties of a grihastha or a student, whatever the phase we are in, when we do that diligently, that is when we get purified. This is a gradual process of purification. Krishna has ensured that if you keep doing this diligently, then in due course of time, your hearts are going to be purified of all the desires. So when somebody's heart is purified of all the desires, and then one decides to give up the duties and the material obligations around him, then it's all right. But he's pointing out that artificially renouncing is not going to help you. It's rather going to lead you to fall down. So as Srila Prabhupada also tells that one cannot attain success by abruptly adopting the fourth order of life, that is sannyas. Sannyas means renunciation. This is the fourth ashram of life, fourth order. Something that we need to do once we are through with all the duties, we have purified our hearts. Well, there are some people, as we see, who in the very early stages of their life make the decision of taking sannyas. They're not even entering into grihastha life or householder life. So what do we make of that? They haven't performed their duties and still they are taking sannyas. What about them? Actually, they must have done their duties in the previous births. They must have already purified their hearts by following their particular varna and the ashram diligently in the previous lifetimes. That is why in this lifetime, in very early stages, in the early ages, they are truly capable of renouncing because of a pure heart. So we must actually evaluate ourselves very honestly. Where do we stand? If we are in a position where we still have a lot of desires for sense gratification, let's face them honestly, and let's not artificially try to renounce things. Rather, let's do our duties in our phase and walk of life nicely. This is going to purify us and eventually bring us to the stage of natural renunciation. And anyway, as Krishna is going to point out, external renunciation is not so important as internal renunciation, which means if you have a renounced heart, a heart unattached to material desires, that's what is required. There are many people we have seen who make a show of being a sannyasi. They make a big fuss about leaving everything and adorning the saffron clothes. But you see, with position comes responsibility. If one chooses to be a sannyasi, then one must truly be in that position to impart spiritual knowledge to people and to renounce all the comforts and material sense gratifications. If one is not doing that, then really he is on the path to fall down. We know of so many so-called babas and sannyasis who, to show to the world, have a renounced exterior, but behind the curtains there is a lot going on. So these people are actually, as Srila Prabhupada is going to tell us in the further purpose, I can't help but quote that, this is all show bottle spiritualism. These are, in fact, Prabhupada uses a certain word, charlatan meditator, which means somebody is doing only for show, nothing else, So it's a beautiful purport. And, Srila Prabhupada goes on to tell us that Lord Krishna does not approve of this principle, because without purification of heart, sannyas is simply a disturbance to the social order. You see the import now? If one is not truly renounced but just showing himself to be renounced and a sannyasi, what kind of social malices such a person breeds. These so-called sannyasis, they are doing every sort of nonsense behind the curtains, and that's a real disturbance to the social order. And in fact, Srila Prabhupada is also making a comment on the Mayavadis. Mayavadis says that once you have taken up the sannyas danda, you must have seen that the sannyasis hold a danda, so that sannyas danda, if they say that if the person holds the sannyas danda or takes on sannyas order of life, he's as good as Narayan, which means he's as good as God. Well, this principle will never fall good with the real devotees, because as Krishna has been pointing out in Gita also, remember 2.12, where he says that every soul is distinct, I am distinct. No, the souls never merge into God. The souls can also never become the same as God. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, first chapter, first shloka, it's been hinted that Krishna is unparalleled, one without a second. That means God, no one of us can ever become gods, whatever we do, So this is a very faulty way of thinking. And Srila Prabhupada says that by by doing the prescribed duties, enforced and empowered with Gyan, that is Buddhi Yoga. So here Srila Prabhupada is pointing out, theory without practical or practical without theory, both are not going to work out. If you're doing your prescribed duties, that means if you're following the path of karma, you also need to be guided by the right knowledge, which means you need to have the relevant knowledge to pursue it. That's the reason when I ask this question, why do you think most people are just giving this up, giving all the religious activities up? The reason for that is that there came a time when we were just forced to do the rituals without knowing the logic behind it. And that's why in our life there is a place for both, for knowing the philosophy, that means for knowing the theory, and for doing the practical as well, right? So Srila Prabhupada is pointing that out. And in the previous sloka also Srila Prabhupada said that religion without philosophy, if we follow the rituals without knowing the philosophy, this can even lead to fanaticism, as we have seen in so many of the so-called dharmas, in so-called religions, that people tend to become fanatic because they don't really know the logic behind it. And if you really ask me, if somebody knows the logic behind spirituality and the real religion or dharma, there can be no clashes between the different kinds of religious practices that people are following, because the basics of every religion are the same, So that's the reason that we must know the philosophy. And then as Srila Prabhupada puts it, that practically in our lives, let's follow both of them and therefore make our spirituality a complete package. So focus on the internals rather than the externals. So focus on the internal renunciation. Make your heart purified of these desires rather than adorning the saffron clothes in a hurry, in a rush, abruptly, as Srila Prabhupada says. So next one, 2.5 says, Krishna says, Nahi kaschit kshanam api jatu tisthati akarmakrit karyate hai avashah karma sarva prakriti jair gunaiha. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. So this is a follow-up, you see, from the previous verse, because Krishna had said, not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, because even if you think I'm not doing anything, you're still going to do things. Even if you make up your mind, all right, from now onwards I will stop doing everything, but you only think so, because there is nobody who can sit idle completely. One has to do something. Not even for a moment can one sit idle, and therefore one will be forced to act according to the modes of nature acting upon the person. And let's make this clear, let's understand this. Actually, initially we have a way of thinking that because we are in the body, we are acting, and when we become realized, when we become free of this material contamination, there will come a time when we will just not need to act, we'll just sit idle in peace. But that's a very incorrect perception, because when we study the qualities of a soul, in the Upanishads, the qualities of the soul are mentioned, and in that it is mentioned that soul is very active. It's a very, very active entity. A soul, what is natural to the soul is action and not inaction. Therefore, a soul has to act no matter what we think, or no matter what we try to force ourselves to do. And because it is the innate nature of the soul to act, it will definitely act. So we have two options. Either we are forced to act by material nature according to the three modes. What are the three modes of material nature? This is explained in a lot more detail in the later chapters, 13, 14 chapters. But here we can just have a quick introduction to the modes of material nature. Well, material nature is this Prakriti, the Bhautik Prakriti, under which we are acting. We also call this Maya, the Maya Shakti. So Maya Shakti is the material nature. Now this lady Maya has three agents, teen deviyan, as I call them. One is the sattva, the second is the rajas, and the third is the tamas. So satogun, rajogun and tamogun, the mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance respectively. So the lady Maya has 3 agents, and when the soul is acting under the spell of Maya or under the control of Maya, according to whichever mode is most prominent in them, the person acts in that manner. Which means if a person is more under the mode of satogun, the person will act in satogun. He will do satoguni activities. Rajoguni activities if he is more under the spell of rajogun. So, in fact, in the introduction we discussed, there is a beautiful picture in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. There is a colored plate here which is showing how the 3 modes of material nature act. So, I will just hold up the book to you and let's see if you recall this. Yes, there it is. See, this is a very beautiful picture. Here we see that here is Krishna, and these are the 3 agents of Maya, the Satogun, the Rajogun and the Tamogun. So, the people are acting because it is the innate nature of the soul to act, which means the source of action is the soul, but in which direction that person acts will be decided by which mode is acting on that person most prominently, which means which of the 3 puppeteers, is most prominently pulling the strings of that person, right? So, Krishna is saying you have 2 options. Well, he is indicating here, is not very explicit here, but what he is saying is that everybody will be forced to act under the 3 modes, even if one thinks that one will not act. It's not possible to not act. You will have to act. But the other option is to act for Krishna. Either you can act for Maya or you can act for Krishna. When you act for Maya, you're bound in fruitive action, because people acting in the spell of Maya, like myself, like most of us, we're still so much under the spell of Maya. People like us who are acting in the spell of Maya are going to be bound by reactions, because if we do good deeds, we will earn some credits, but these credits are also going to bind us. And if we do bad deeds, well, we'll have to give something to somebody. So credits and debits. So unless the slate is clean, unless the ledger is clean, we are not going to go away from here. We are not going to escape from this material world. So Krishna is indicating that you will have to act. Right now, it's your choice whether you act for Maya or you act for Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada is explaining this beautifully in his purport. It's sometimes, I feel so surprised. Well, actually, there's no surprise about it, because Srila Prabhupada is an empowered incarnation of Krishna. He is a Shakti-avesh avatar. Krishna has invested his energies in Srila Prabhupada, and that's why he's able to make out those very sensitive points that we just need to hear at that moment, So Srila Prabhupada is saying it's not a question of embodied life, which means it's not that you are in this body and that's why you're acting. You will act even if you're not in this body, So because it is the nature of the soul to be always active. And as Chaitanya Charandas Prabhuji says, if the soul is in the body and still it's acting so much, imagine how active it will be if the soul is managed to shake off this burden of a body. Something like if you're going to moon or to space or to any other planet in the space, you will be wearing a very heavy space suit, right? So imagine how much more active one is when one can just shed off and just remove that space suit, which is actually a burden. So this body is like a burden. It's like a space suit which we have to wear because we are living on this earth. It's the space suit for the earth suit rather. So Srila Prabhupada says, without the presence of the spirit soul, the material body cannot move I mean, imagine somebody's soul moves out of the body. How does the body look? It's practically as good as non-living. I mean, you may call it dead, which is technically more true, but it's actually as good as dull matter, right? And the body is only a dead vehicle to be worked by the spirit soul, which is always active and cannot stop even for a moment. And that's why the spirit soul has to be engaged in the good work of Krishna consciousness. And Krishna has given us two options, as I told you, that either in Maya or work for Krishna. And you see, he has also given us two ways to purify ourselves. One is a gradual way. Keep performing your duties, prescribed duties. So gradually you are going to be purified and walk up the ladder, walk up the yoga ladder, right up to Krishna. But the other method is the shortcut method, the fast method. If you remember, the elevator method, which is Bhakti Yoga, which means work for me. Right now, take up Bhakti. Whatever you do, do it as a offering to me, because then I will take away the reactions from the work. And that's how, really, in the previous shloka, there was a word called Naishkarmya, which means freedom from reaction. So Krishna is telling us that if you really want to have Naishkarmya, which means freedom from reaction, then the way to be, and Srila Prabhupada is explaining this in detail, that if we work for Krishna, then we are truly in the stage of Naishkarmya, which means if we do every action as an offering to Krishna, then it becomes free from all reactions, because Krishna just absorbs all the reaction from that work. Right, so this is so wonderfully put here by Srila Prabhupada, quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam also, that if the soul is engaged in his natural function of Krishna consciousness, whatever he is able to do is good for him. Which means, if one is going on the Gyan path, he has to really work hard to realize himself, But if one is doing his natural function of Krishna consciousness, then whatever little he does is good for him. If you remember, shloka number 2, in the second chapter it came, Neha Vikram Nasho Asti Pratyavayo Na Vidyate, which means even this bit of progress on this path will lead to unending and undestructible results. So in this particular shloka, Srimad Bhagavatam has been quoted by Srila Prabhupada. He says, Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harer bhajan apakvo atha patet tato yadi yatra kvava bhadram abhud amushakim ko vartha apto bhajatam swadharmatah. If someone takes to Krishna consciousness, even though he may not follow the prescribed duties in the Shastras or execute the devotional service properly, even though he may fall down from the standard, there is no loss or evil for him. Which means whatever we manage to do in Krishna consciousness will stand to eternal credit for us. It is indestructible. So in that case, even if a person is not doing his duties properly or not even doing the devotional service properly, still he does not, let us say he's not at a loss in any way. He will be a person to gain something from it, But if he carries out all the injunctions for purification in the Shastras, what does it avail him if he is not Krishna consciousness? And now the contrary statement, if somebody is doing everything given in the Shastras to purify himself, but if that is not leading to any interest in Krishna, any devotion to Krishna, then it's all useless. Because the ultimate purpose of all purificatory processes is to evoke love for Krishna. So if that's not happening, then all purificatory processes are useless. We see people following all sorts of rituals, in their life, but they have no love for God, and that's why we say that all these rituals are merely rituals unless we have love for God, unless we are able to evoke that love of God, and that's when it becomes spirituals. So we need to follow spirituals, not just rituals. So it's a beautiful, by saying this last statement, Therefore, sannyas or any purificatory process is to help reach the ultimate goal of becoming Krishna consciousness, without which everything is considered as a failure. So, these two shlokas, Krishna is explaining to us that artificial stopping of all the activities is not the way to be. Rather, keep working, keep doing your duties, better still, do all your actions in Krishna consciousness. Or do everything that you're doing as an offering to me, which means practically for us, if I am working in the kitchen, cooking food, let me do it with the consciousness for cooking for Krishna, because that makes the food free of any reaction. So the entire family is benefited from it spiritually and in all senses, in fact. Similarly, if I'm going to my office doing, carrying out my the functions of my job, let me do it as an offering to Krishna. That purifies what I'm doing and it takes the reaction out of the job. That is what is real Naishkarmya, which means freedom from reaction. And chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, reading Bhagavad Gita and the other Shastras are a part of Krishna consciousness. So let's not forget that the holy name is so powerful that it can lead us to the right path, the path which needs to be followed by every single living being. So with that, let's end up here. I hope you liked the session. And till we meet next time, please keep chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, because this is the essence of all knowledge. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.